just say I do.
Welcome back to Behind the Veil, a show that provides insight into how to plan a successful wedding. My name is Keith Willard. I'm the host and creator of the show, as well as a wedding planner that's based in South Florida. Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to revisit a very popular segment about mental health wedding planning during the age of COVID. This particular segment got over 5,000 views on YouTube and is quickly climbing the charts on our brand new Behind the Veil podcast. So we knew that this was going to be a subject that we would need to revisit, as I find my words. And so today we welcome back Dr. Tania Parades and Jan Carroll from the Boca Raton Bridal, but I'll introduce them shortly. But before I get to that, let me introduce our Behind the Veil crew. Marcy Gutenberg with An Affair to Remember by Marcy. Hi, Marcy. It's great to see you again.
Hello. Great to see you.
As well as Tyler Black with Cachet Events. Hi, Tyler.
Hi, everybody.
And, of course, the ever beautiful Brooke Logan Stoner. Brooke, it's great to see you again as well.
Salutations. Smash.
Salutations. All right, so let's get to our special guest. Our first is Dr. Tania Parades, who is a clinical social worker in Miami with a private practice that covers both Fort Lauderdale and Miami that specializes in individual relationship counseling as well as the treatment and management of stress, anxiety, and depression, which makes her perfect for our show. She is a graduate from both the University of Miami and Barry University, where she is an adjunct professor. Tania holds a diplomat designation by the Board of Clinical Social Work, as well as her doctorate, where she conducts research in the area of postpartum depression. And she has been in a direct clinical practice for 19 years. And I should also say, was named one of the top 50 couples therapists in the United States. Dr. Parades, it is great to have you back. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Keith. It's nice to see you and everyone else as well.
Yes, we have a lot to talk about. Before we get to that, let me also introduce our second guest. Jan Carroll is the owner of Boca Raton Bridal, a dress boutique located right here in South Florida. 15 years ago, she bought the store on a whim and armed with a new mortgage and a degree in fashion marketing from the Art Institute and a membership with the Bridal Council out of New York, she began her dream. And I should also mention that out of those 15 years, 13 of those years have been award-winning with both The Knot and The Wedding Wire. So Janet, thank you for being back.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so guys, we have a lot to talk about today. Honestly, mental health and wedding planning during the age of COVID. I mean, wedding planning is already so difficult and it's so stressful, but now you throw in COVID. It's monstrous. It's just crazy. And I think it's very different for the bride and for the vendor. So, Dr. Parades, give us a little bit about what people are facing right now in this new world.
So the last time you and we all spoke, Keith, I think it was towards the beginning part of the pandemic, and now I don't even want to say the end, we're kind of far enough in where people know that this is now a thing that will likely impact the rest of the year. I think all of the brides and all of the couples that I was working with from the beginning of the year that were going to get married this year, I believe no one has had their wedding the way that they had planned it. So I think now I've noticed with the people that I've been seeing that people are almost starting to get a little numb to what's happening. And it's almost like it doesn't cross their mind to do a wedding the way that they wanted it. And now they've already shifted because vendors have shifted, right? And so event spaces have shifted. And so it's no longer the hope that something will change. It's like, this is what it is. And now what can we do with what the new normal is for now?
Well, and of course, now with the new uptick, I'm even having clients that we moved that wedding a year out that are now reaching out to me and going, okay, maybe we need to move the wedding again. Yeah. I mean, there was already stress built in with having to move the wedding, but now we're going to move it a second time.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, it's just some of those things that go into planning. I mean, when we talk about wedding planning, we talk about family dysfunction. is a big part of it.
Right.
And I wanted to ask you a real specific question because we didn't cover it on the last show. But as a planner, as a vendor, what are some warning signs that we should be on the lookout for when we're dealing with a bride that we know that she's just about to hit that limit? You know, there's that anxiety that's building up. And when is it appropriate to reach out to the family and even bring this up? Because as a wedding planner, sometimes.
Right. That's a loaded question, Keith. When do you guys reach out to the family? So I'll give you my rule of thumb. So whenever I have couples in my office and I ask a question to one person and the other person answers, and then I ask another question and the other person answers, that's kind of an indication to me that the person that I'm asking the question is not giving his or her response for whatever reason. And so I think it's important for all persons that are involved within weddings to be mindful of whose wedding is it. So now you enter into a conversation of, well, who's fronting the cost of it, right? So if the bride's family is fronting the cost, or if the groom's family is fronting the cost, they may feel more inclined to feel like they have an opinion to give, and that's fine. I always defer back to what are the goals and the values that the couple has together as a unit. And I had shared this with you, Keith, this concept of thinking of a unit with your spouse, with your future spouse, with your partner. What are the values that you and your partner have for this wedding? What's the vision? So I would kind of go back to that. So if that's your immediate conversation with the bride and the groom, or with the couple, then this is the vision. Is whatever we're talking about, does that fall in line with the vision? If that doesn't fall in line with the vision, then how does this fit the vision, or does it even need to be in there? To answer your question about when do you reach out to the family, that's a very specific question. I guess my answer would probably be like, does the couple kind of give you leeway to be able to do that? If the couple gives you leeway, then I think that you can easily do that. This suggestion XYZ that you made really is not in line with what the couple had talked to me about. So it's just not going to fit this.
Well, and the thing is that, we get very close with our clients. We obviously, we're in the trenches, so to speak, with them, and sometimes it does become very friendly. I mean, I'm still friends with almost all of my previous clients, and so, but there is that line there is that moment that you like, you cross this red line and all of a sudden you can turn a very joyous event into something pretty dramatic.
Yeah. And I do think that, Keith, that ask what that line is. So is it okay for the mom and the mother-in-law and for the father-in-law and the sister and and all these people to give their opinion? But at the end of the day, who are we going to listen to? Who is going to have the say in the color of the flowers? Who's going to have the say in the kind of dress that you have? I was thinking about wedding dresses the other day because I found my old wedding dress almost 20 years old. So I stumbled upon it. And I remember when I was choosing my dress, I was very clear. I mean, I was in my early 20s. So I kind of had my opinion set, and my mom, God bless her, was very good at letting me do. I mean, it was my wedding, right? Letting me do what I wanted to do. But right next to me, there was a bride. I'll never forget this, in the same shop. And she had like 10 people. I had my mother and my maid of honor, and that's it. This lady had so many people. I felt like, so who's going to pick this dress? Like, are they going to vote? Like what's going on? It's so charged, right? Because that's such a momentous event for like a lot of people choosing a dress. But then you have to share it with all these people. And so who has a right to say something? So I kind of feel like vendors probably need to ask upfront, where's your line? Like, at what point do you want me to say, that doesn't really fit, blah, blah, blah. But if you don't know where the line is, then you really don't know where to intervene.
Well, and Jan, that is a perfect segue into your world, because obviously you've seen this. You've seen the 10 people coming to choose a dress when it's really the bride's choice. So
we deal with this a lot. And for me, my stance has always been the bride is my client. And especially where my Boca location is, we run into a lot where the mom thinks it's her wedding. And I've had many mothers over the years tell me it's her wedding. And the bride is just simply an accessory there for that. So I tend to just read my client, and there are plenty of times that we've sort of intervened. trying to rein in the crowd. You know, a lot of times we'll be like, if everybody could just be quiet, let's see how she feels before we chime in. That's always a fairly effective thing.
Right.
And then we deal with the client a lot behind the scenes just to kind of get a feel of what the dynamic is. And then we kind of go from there. But I've definitely gone toe to toe many times with the family on behalf of the client.
Well, you know, and I think everybody on this panel can agree that, you know, our job is to be the bride's advocate in almost all things. And sometimes it is important for us to go to toe with
and
the
most
family.
of the time, the clients that deal with this, the dynamic in the family anyway, is that they're kind of, that they sit back and let the mother take the reins, or the mother-in-law take the reins, or whoever it is that's running the show. You know, you've got years of family history there. Like, this is not a trait that just appeared while dress shopping. This is generally a dynamic that everybody's sort of settled into. So a lot of times those girls just don't know how to use their voice. So we try to help them and use it for them to some degree.
Well, and, you know, and Dr. Paredes, I mean, I know this is going to be a random question because I've never seen it in the 2 decades that I've been planning weddings or heard of it. You know, do you think it's important to have some family counseling I think it's important to have some family counseling anyway, but, you know, do you think it's a great tool for people to have, especially now going into trying to plan a wedding?
So that's a good question. So here is how I'm going to answer that question. I cannot tell you the amount of married couples over 20 years that I've been practicing come into my office, and I ask them what I consider to be basic premarital questions. How are you going to divide household responsibilities? Are you dividing them equally? Are you dividing them among gender lines? How are you going to communicate? If you have a disagreement, how are you going to argue? And I get a blank stare. And they're like, well, we just never talked about that. And I go, are you going to save your money in a bank account? Are you going to have a joint bank account? How are you going to handle family? Well, we just never talked about that. And I'm just like, how do you not talk about that? Like, this is your life. So
Right.
yes, absolutely. I do think that at least have a little bit of a roadmap or a guide of, here are some pitfalls that a professional can see. Here are some tools to navigate those pitfalls. Go and deal with them in the way that you see fit, but at least be aware that those are there. I think people take let's just kind of figure it out along the way. And that works if you're married to the exact same person that you are. And if that's impossible, because
That's impossible.
exactly. Therefore, it doesn't have to be formal counseling. I mean, I think it needs to be formal counseling because we obviously have a framework to be able to give. It could also be reading a book together, reading a series of books together. There's a lot of good books out there that couples can kind of really follow. And I have a list of books that I recommend to couples, and they have like homework assignments in them and activities for them to do. My only thing with that is that someone needs to be a guide for that, because then when that goes south and you have an argument over it, how do you kind of come back from that? So I would rather give people preventative tools than have people tell me it's either this or we get a divorce. Because at that point, you're kind of already 1 foot out the door, you know?
Well, and we brought this up on the previous show. I mean, I've had brides that were getting married just to get married. They weren't they weren't getting married because they loved somebody. They got married because that's been their dream since they were a little child. And, you know, and I've actually said that to a bride. I'm like, I'm really concerned that you're getting married just because you want to get married and not because you're in love. And, you know, fast forward 6 months and guess what? They broke up and then they want their deposits back and all that stuff. So, you know, I think it's important that you at least say something and that you trust those family dynamics, because a lot of times when I see something and I see a family, I'm looking at it from an outside perspective, and they've gotten so used to that dynamic that they don't even see it anymore. I mean, Jan, I'm sure you can agree with me that there are some buttons that some family members have placed and they just push.
Yep. And I always say, especially for the first timers, marriage is like childbirth. You know, somebody can tell you about it, but until you've actually done it, you've got no freaking clue
Yes.
what you're in for. And even the best marriages have hard times.
Yeah.
And like you said, people are so caught up, and this is what I see a lot. They're so caught up in the fantasy and
Right.
the being in love, that they think that that's just going to take care of everything. And that's really not, that's like having no retirement plan because you're definitely going to win the lottery. It works out about the same.
Right. Well,
But
sorry, go
people
ahead.
just don't get that. So, and yes, the family dynamic and that, I'll never forget. I had a grandmother look at her daughter and she said, that would be pretty on a skinny girl. And this girl was skinny. She was a size 6, which is like a 0 on the street. And she'd already bought the dress and the grandma just didn't know. So, I get all kinds of stuff like that. And it's like, at that point, we usher her into the fitting room and we try to lay out the grandma as, gently as possible. But yeah, they just that's why I say the family dynamic, it's already there before they ever walk in the door. So, it's, how do you deal with them when they get there? Because,
Well, and that's a great
all
question.
the time.
Well, and that's a great question, Dr. Parades. What are some hints, some tips in redirecting these conversations? Because I know I hear it from literally every single person in the wedding. I'll hear one opinion from the bride, one opinion from the groom, one opinion from the mom. What are some easy takeaway tips that any vendor or any person can use to be able to redirect these conversations into something that's healthier?
So, yeah,
Nothing like putting you on the spot.
I want to say that I'm shocked over that comment that Jen said, but I've heard similar kind of disgusting things. That's just disgusting on every level. With that said, I do think, and I'm assuming, Jen, that you did some version of this. Either you distracted her, took her out, or took her out to like a quiet space and said, "Hey, I'm checking in. Are you okay?" And so those types of interventions from someone that's a vendor that, like you said, Keith, you guys form relationships with these couples and with these brides. I think that that's a nice little checks and balance. And maybe at that point, I'm assuming the bride will probably say, oh, she always does this. She always says this. She always has to ruin it. She always has to say something. And allowing that person to be frustrated. Okay, take a deep breath. This is your wedding. This is your dress. I think you look beautiful. And I've been doing this for X number of years. How do you feel in the dress? And having that person sort of within that comment, you're not going to be able to turn a blind eye to that comment. Most people won't. But how do you feel about the dress that you're in, independent of that statement?
Right.
We talked her through it, and we did. We pulled her out, and I've said many times to the family members that all that matters is how she feels. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what any of us here think. It matters how she feels. If she feels beautiful, then she's going to look beautiful, and that's it. We may not want her to pick what she's picking. I can't even tell you. I have 1,000 stories just like that one.
And I've actually had come to Jesus meetings with the family before.
Oh yeah, me too. Many times.
Right. It's mostly about the budget for my part, to say, okay, guys, we have to have this come to Jesus meeting about the budget. Because
you're keeping out the mouth. That's
yeah.
That's what our Jesus moments usually are.
Yeah. So, I think that it's important that us as vendors in these weddings, because it is the most important part of their day. This is, the most important day of their life. Doing whatever we can to ensure that there's some balance, emotional balance is really important. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. A planner does that. We get into this.
We are absolutely therapists. We're not trained in the same way, but it's, I can't tell you how many days I come home and I'm like, I don't know how people do this for an actual living because because you must have a lot of cocktails at your house. That's
20 years. Yeah. Listen, yes. So, right. So everything is perspective, right? Like to me, I couldn't fathom staring at dresses and flowers and, napkins and invitations. To me, I couldn't imagine that. But if you're a creative person, that's a joy. To me, these people are sitting in front of me. They want the help. They want to be able to have the tools. So to me, that's phenomenal. And I would rather people that are soliciting the help, like help us navigate this. To me, that's like the best thing in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and have you noticed that so we knew that we saw a big switch, obviously, in the relationships that people had when COVID first came in. Are you, Dr. Parades, are you seeing an uptick now that we're seeing those infection rates starting to climb again? Are you seeing that stress level starting to spike?
So earlier I said that people are becoming numb, and I kind of think that's what's going on. You know, COVID has probably taught everybody a lot of lessons, and one of the lessons that has probably taught people is that your mental health is not an option. You can't say, well, I can navigate with my own tool. You can. Nobody can. Even the person with the most tools in the world needs tools to be able to navigate a pandemic, because it still is a global pandemic. This is not over, I believe, for any country. So I think some people are becoming numb, Keith. I also think some people didn't realize it would be this long. And so I'm seeing, like, I call it like a second tier panic, where they just thought that they would be okay for the holidays. So now we're talking about, I mean, there were brides who were thinking in March, well, my wedding's in December, I'll be fine. December's now. So if you're going to do something different, you probably, right, Keith, I'm assuming, have to have decided that by at least September. There is no waiting until October, November. So I think the reality has been a very cold bucket of water for like a lot of people. And I think it's forced them to shift into, well, we still want an event, so how can we still do something meaningful with certain people that we want there and still honor the story that we want to tell?
Well, and we have, and I've actually seen a shift. I mean, I have a wedding on this Friday. I've had 2 other weddings, you know, that were smaller, and that we're going to do the larger celebration in the following year. I think that's a super healthy way to, you know, be able to adjust to this crazy world. But is there a site or a place that, you know, somebody watching this show or listening to this show can go to that has some general information about how to deal with family members in a healthy way? Is there a resource that people can?
So you had asked me earlier about resources of sort of counseling that is a lot more cost effective than sort of, you know, like the generic private practitioner. So I don't know if people know this. I feel like this is like common knowledge in my field, but every college, university, every single one. So here locally, St. Thomas, Berry, FIU, Nova, if they have a school of counseling, marriage and family therapy, mental health counseling, or social work or psychology, they have a clinic on site where those students train. And they are directly supervised by licensed practitioners like myself. And it is mostly extremely low cost counseling. And just because they are students does not mean that it is not sound counseling. Everyone starts at that location, at that place, and they are directly supervised. And it is a phenomenal resource that I really believe a lot of people don't know about. I always encourage people, get in check with your family dynamics. Jan was mentioning right about the family dynamics. Get in check with what those dynamics are for you and your partner before you even attempt to go down the aisle or wedding plan. And be very clear, guys, as vendors, who moves the bus. So if there's a huge family behind that couple and all those family members move the bus, that'll directly impact the sanity of the couple, if you will.
Jan, I mean, obviously we're listening to Dr. Parades, you know, talk about these great resources, and, you know, have you seen specifically a warning sign when you see a bride just about to blow up? Is there a tick? Is there something that you've seen that's kind of a common denominator in that stress level that you see with brides? Is it a like, you know, a sigh? Is it a, you know, a twist of the head? I mean,
can you hear the pin leave the grenade? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Controversial yet brave.
I like that.
One of the surest signs is we start seeing a real uptake in middle of the night emails. I get a lot of that. That's usually an excellent sign that somebody needs to be flagged in the system as needing a lot of extra attention, for sure.
And do you train your people for that too? Like, in other words,
I handle it. I check our emails 24/7. So when I get one like that, I make sure that she has direct line to me. I've got a few people that I would allow to handle that, but that kind of thing I usually take, because they need a lot of hand holding. And I'm the only idiot that will answer an email at 2 a.m. So I can't really.
Let the daycare and babysitting begin.
That's what I tell my people all the time. That's all this is. It's a combination of therapy, shopping, and babysitting, all rolled into one. And, you know, for us, we've seen our girls all originally rebooked for summer. And then that obviously didn't happen. So they all dealt with a second cancellation. And what we really saw a lot of were weddings being called off. I think this was a real reality check for a lot of people on their compatibility level and their ability to navigate a stressful situation together. So I feel like as somebody that understands what going through a divorce is like, I feel like having it called off is the best possible scenario versus, going down the road. And then most of our girls at this point are pushing way out into 21 and 22. They're just...
And of course, now it's even worse because there's a lot of people, especially in South Florida, that have lost their job, that don't have job security. And, obviously dresses are kind of high up on the budget scale when we're talking about cost per item. I mean, those money talks are super, super important. And Dr. Parades, we're like, how do you broach that subject about money, especially during this time?
So I go back to values. What does it matter to the couple? I had shared this with you, Keith, when we last had our live on Behind the Veil that, I got married very young. We were 22, 23. I mean, we were kids, right? I was fresh out of my master's. My husband was starting his master's. And so when we got married, we didn't have a lot of money. Our value system was, let's have something that we can afford. My then boyfriend and I, now husband, paid for everything. We did not take one dime from our parents, which meant that we were going to have something small and intimate. My dress was, tasteful. It wasn't very expensive. It was very indicative of someone that was getting married very young, that didn't have a lot of money. And to this day, I love my dress because it's the perfect dress for a 22, 23-year-old who has zero money in her bank account and wanted something nice and meaningful. And so I go back to, if your value system tells you, I really want something that looks really nice and I want a lot of flowers, then that's where your money goes. If your dress matters to you because you want to hand it down to your daughter, you want to hand it down to, then you put your money there. I go back to the values. Some people want a really nice invitation and want to cut a corner elsewhere, and that's okay too. What are the value systems that you have of what this wedding is supposed to be? And I always tell people, then that's where your income should go.
I always try to tell girls, starting a wedding or starting a marriage buried in debt is the worst possible case scenario.
Oh my God.
And I see it all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, please don't do this. It's not going to be pretty going forward.
Right. And you're like, please don't pull out that credit card that has 22% interest. Please don't do that. And I tell people all the time, please don't depend on gifts. Do not count on those gifts, those checks for cover your budget. Don't do that. You're going to get yourself in trouble. Not only are you going to deal with all the stress that's coming from keeping yourself healthy, keeping your family healthy during COVID, now you're going to be worried about money from here until, years out. And that's no way to start a family.
My favorite thing that I've seen through all of this is I've got a lot of girls that just sort of said, you know what, I just want to be married to him, and just got married at home and did what they needed to do. And, everybody says they'll have the party down the road. Some will, most won't, in my experience. Yeah. But, they didn't lose their mind over the party. And I know it's really hard for some people because, again, it's the death of the fantasy. And I've learned in my 46 years that that's generally harder than the death of what you've actually lost is what you've made it in your mind. But those girls that are just like, you know what, I just want to be his wife and that's it. And, let's do this. That's been a nice thing to see. It's been kind of the offset to the mass, cancellations that we have on the other hand.
Well, and that's actually a really important subject. I love the fact that you just brought up the death of the anticipation, because we did talk about that a little bit on the last show, is that sometimes you have to let people grieve that anticipated experience. I mean, Dr. Parades, I'm assuming that's the healthy way to get through a sad subject, like having to postpone or cancel your wedding. Yeah. And so
we talked about this at length the last time, right, Keith, about anticipated grief. And I had mentioned that there was an article. If folks want to Google New York Times and anticipated grief, that's the article that I was talking about the last time, about how we're really grieving what we thought this year would bring. So if you're trying to get married in this year, this was your wedding year. 2020 was your wedding year. It was when your life was going to start. You were going to be able to get married, and you were going to be able to have this trip that you've been saving for X number of months or years. And all of that, like Jan said, is gone. So that plan is gone. So what are we supposed to do now? Like, I didn't plan for that, right? And so it is okay that you're upset about that, and it's okay to stay upset. But now that we are here, how can we begin to move forward? So if I still want to be married to this person, then how can we do that in a way that is meaningful, keeps our values in play, but still keeps everybody safe?
So
I always say one of my favorite things to say is life on life's terms. And, this is not going to be the first, shit pie that you're handed while you're married. Excuse my
No.
So, if you can get through this and be
Jen,
okay.
I'm so glad you're here.
You've got a shot at the longevity, because you've already made it through something that's really hard. I mean, this is really hard for everyone on so many levels. And, I think it's a great testament to those that can navigate it. And you can be sad, and you can be disappointed, and you can be frustrated, and you can be angry. It's just all about how you move through that. That's really all you can do. I mean, if you end up a hot train wreck of a mess, then things are probably going to be harder for you down the road. If you deal with it, grieve it, move through it, you probably got a better shot.
Well, and Tyler is literally just finished a couple of weddings out of town, and I know that he has some fabulous stories from his Dallas wedding. So Tyler, give us a little insight about what you're seeing kind of out in the real world right now. What are brides facing? What are some real life stories?
Well, I think one of the main things that I have experienced, especially with this one wedding you just mentioned, was I think the bride got so stressed out on her dream of what she wanted her experience of the wedding to be for everybody. And of course, it was a little different than what she expected because of the timing. And the thing I'm going to implore the brides right now is everyone is in this together. You're having a hard time. Your vendors are having a very hard time. It's all very different for all of us. And this particular bride singled me out to be the whipping post of all of her anxieties and to blame me for it. And it was probably one of the most beautiful weddings I've ever done in my life. And it was also one of the most horrific experiences I've ever had in my life. And
that's really sad.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I have no love for this family, this bride, nothing. And I was just the one that was the least known. I was the one that was the least, but I pulled out everything for these people. And my stress was just as bad for them. What people don't realize, like even flowers, the world was shut down for months. Yeah. That means farms were shut down. Flowers are not what they were 6, 7 months, a year ago. We can't get exactly. So some things came in from the farms from overseas, a little bit different, a hue of a flower different. They tried to fulfill the order for them, but everything was beautiful. But this bride hated purple, and her whole wedding was ruined because a couple of flowers had a purple hue to it. No one else in the world knew about this, but she had to have her mental breakdown over a purple flower. Therefore, I was a mess. The flowers were a mess. Nothing could be right for this woman. And
by the way, that wedding was beautiful. I don't want people to think that wedding wasn't.
No,
it was stunning.
It was one of my most proud moments of doing wet work. But this bride was ridiculous. She was when I talk about mental case, she was so far out there for this but only to me. Everyone else was great.
So Tyler, I think you brought up actually a really important point here, is that as a vendor, and Dr. Tania Parades, I mean, as a vendor, sometimes we are the whipping post. When is it appropriate to stand up for yourself? When is that moment that you go, okay, you know what, I got to defend myself on this.
as a therapist, it's my job to tell people likely a lot of times what they don't want to hear. So quite frankly, I would probably say this up front. There will be moments where I will tell you something that you don't want to hear, but I think you need to hear, and give me the latitude to at least say it and be able to explain myself. I do think that if someone gets abusive to you, that literally is right on that line, then that's probably where you need to say, stop right there. Take a minute, refocus, and kind of just refocus someone's attention on whatever's happening in the moment. If it's choosing flowers or choosing a dress or moving on with the event, people get caught up in their own stuff in their head. And this woman sounds like she didn't realize like the larger picture of something because something didn't look correct for her and for whatever implications that it had.
And it was a communication problem as well, because she's a very busy person, a very successful person, and she put her brother in charge of flowers. Therefore, I really never met this woman. I was dealing with the brother the whole time, and I was dealing with their Pinterest pages of what their dreams were.
That's my favorite.
Can I smell a little sabotage?
I know. I'm like, oh, that's my favorite.
Thank you, Brooke.
Pinterest.
Thank you, Brooke. It just really was, and partly it was my fault because I haven't ever dealt with a wedding like this. It was put on very quickly. It was a big event. It was big, and it was done in a backyard. It was really a spectacular situation.
Really was.
It was the scenery, the wedding, everything was beautiful. The guests were great. But she just decided to be mental, and she directed it towards the person that really was her biggest ally. I was really the one making it all happen.
And
I almost walked off the job the night before, and that would have been real pretty. But I'm a professional, and I wouldn't do that. But
plus you were out of town and you were staying at their place.
So, but then
it's a little difficult to walk off the job when you're.
But the thing is, I really think people they just turn into a bundle of ugliness, and they don't know where to release it to.
Yeah.
And someone's going to receive it. And if it's not a vendor, if it's not a mother, a sister, it may be the fiance. Someone's going to receive this stuff.
Or the unfortunate florist.
Like we were talking about, I think we need to be real about expectations. What this wedding needed was a solid planner. It didn't have it. So there was a lot of chiefs. There was a lot of chiefs there. A lot of planners.
I've been a big proponent of having a planner, even if you're having a small backyard event. It takes off a lot of the stress. It gives somebody.
There was no one to be my ally. It was like,
and sometimes it's not even about being an ally. It's about having strong communication skills because I think now more than ever, we have to be super careful about how we set those expectations. If you had asked me a year ago if I was going to set expectations and I'm like, oh yeah, your wedding is going to go on time as planned, I wouldn't even thought twice about it. Now I have to go, okay, so this is the date that we're setting. With the understanding
we're trying to get you there between 5 and 7.
Exactly. With the understanding that given the world as it is, and now I have to set expectations about people's health and about people not coming to the wedding because they're afraid of their own health.
So I had a bride. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No. I actually was going to direct this to you anyway.
I had a bride recently that they had moved their original date. I believe was in April. I was seeing them for premarital counseling, and they're a lovely couple. Have a very strong relationship, phenomenal communication skills. They moved their wedding from March, April to November. Obviously, they've now canceled it. They ended up doing something small with his parents and her mom and her grandmother, literally like 4 people. The morning of the event, her mother got a fever, ran in the morning to the Hard Rock Stadium to get tested. An hour later, she was positive.
No.
So then they called me frantically. Oh my God, I'm freaking out. I'm like, take a deep breath. Okay, what do you want to do? Obviously, your mom's contagious. So, in theory, you may be contagious if you were with her yesterday, right? But she hadn't seen her for like a couple of days. And I go, well, you and your partner have been in the same house. So if you're going to get it, then you're all together. You need to disclose to the officiant that your mother is contagious. And so they were able to do it. The officiant was like 15, 20 feet. He had a mask. He had a shield. He got a clear plexiglass stand. So he still married them, but it didn't look the same. even their postponed wedding, the postponement of the postponement didn't even look the same because of this wrench that got thrown in that, like the morning of. So I do think that vendors need to start asking questions of, so what happens if someone within your wedding party comes out positive? Like, what's the contingency plan? Like, I know you don't want plan B or C or D, but let's talk about plan B, C, or D, right?
Yeah, and
Becky's sitting at the back of the bus, honey. For sure.
Right, Becky's at the back of the bus. But so Jan, I mean, with this change in having the special day on one day and then doing the celebration on another day, are you seeing people trying to do two separate dresses so that mentally it's a separate affair? You know,
For the most part, if they're doing something really small at home, then yes, they're trying to do something different. I have had some girls that, still wear it depending on what they bought, and depending on the size of what they're doing. And then a lot of times girls realize that they can still do some of the pictures and things that they like. So they'll do that. In fact, I had 2 dresses dropped off yesterday that they got married in them, in the very small ceremony. We're going to clean them, and then they're going to have the wedding, quote unquote, in a year or so. So it kind of goes both ways, but we're definitely seeing an uptick in that, under $1,000 more casual wear at home dress. We've added a lot of inventory in that.
Well, and then are you dealing and having to go through the whole, how does this wedding dress look on me scenario with the family? Is it also, just as crazy as the original dress?
No, because those girls are coming in now last minute. Most of them already have a dress. So they've already done that experience with the family. So now it's like, okay, I'm getting married in 2 weeks at home. I need something to wear. So it's a whole different mindset. Those are a lot easier. Now I know why nobody cries at Saks Fifth Avenue.
Yeah, nobody cries at Saks.
Nobody cries at Saks. When the sweater's not the right color, nobody freaks out. Yeah, so that's a totally different experience. That's more of like an off the rack, like give me something pretty to wear. We've already done the whole production with the other dress.
Well, I mean, I just think, with what you deal with, what Tyler deals with, what Marcy deals with, I think it's super important for, us as vendors, have a psychologist, have somebody to reach out to. So I'm going to circle back, actually, Dr. Paredes, to the cost associated with finding a psychologist and some places that people can turn to, because you've already talked about the universities, as a great resource. Are there some other resources? Because right now, obviously, I can't afford anything. I can't afford crap until hopefully 2021. Whenever.
Yeah, but you can still afford me, honey.
I can actually. Well, you cost a White Claw and a pack of cigarettes, so I'm good.
How dare you? My favorite thing you've ever said to me is, "I just paid you."
That's why Brooke and I are buddies. That's me.
What are you doing next Thursday at 2, Jen?
I want to actually add on to Keith's question, because I feel a lot of brides pay attention to social media, and that's a great outlook, an outlet for people to do some private writing if it's a private social group. With the addition of price points for some mental health counselors, where else would people be able to get resources that might be more in a private setting, that may not be in a formal setting because they don't want to go out?
So, Marcy, I actually think that you hit the thing that I was going to say first, was that right now, most of us are really active on social media. So go on Instagram and do a generic search for mental health, wedding planning, or any other catchphrase. And 9 times out of 10, you will find a mental health professional talking about anxiety, talking about wedding planning, talking about how to offset stress for free on Instagram. And obviously that's not the same as therapy, but it certainly is very helpful. I did talk about the universities, Keith, and again, that's a resource that I really feel is very underused. The other thing that people probably don't know about is there's something called, I believe, Open Path, and they are a mental health collective. And these are therapists just like myself with X number of years of practice that are agreeing to be on the site. It's kind of like a Psychology Today, where you look by area, you look by issue that you're seeking, you can look by gender, you can look by cost, and they have severely and drastically reduced the cost of their therapy. So I'm just going to throw out generic numbers. Let's say someone is charging $200 an hour. They could potentially be charging $30-$40. And it doesn't mean that the service is less. It just means that professionals are now in a position where, oh my God, there's a great need. I need to serve.
I'm pretty sure that's what Keith just implied, how cheap I was, wasn't it? A case of Lloyd Claw and a pack of cigarettes, $30. Okay.
That stuff is between you two. I'm not even sure. Look, I kind of.
Well, I think Keith needs a doctor here, so today's the day.
I would hand over my PhD if you can teach me how to do that with my hair. Actually,
I know, right?
So two of your friends still like me.
The other thing, Keith, that I would also say is on top of Open Path Collective, you can always go to Psychology Today, for example, and do the same thing. You can do a search by issue, by gender, by years of service, years of training. You are also recognized. Most of us are virtual. So you don't have to see, for example, I'm in Miami, but I'm licensed in the state of Florida. So I see anybody in Florida. I have patients in Tallahassee, in Pensacola, in the middle of nowhere, Florida, because I'm licensed in the state. So if you are moving to another state for a couple of months, you can see any therapist licensed in a state. So think beyond your little town, think broad within the state that you're in.
Well, and
I'd also like to add that I really
ahead.
believe that what people have to realize is that your mental health, that's an investment. If you can't really say that you can't afford it if you're going out to dinner 3 nights a week, or you just bought a brand new car. You know, I think so much of that also falls into what your priorities are.
Yep.
And, you know, taking care of yourself really has to be at the top of the list.
Right.
Because if you're a hot mess mentally, not much else is going to go your way.
Yep.
And then the other thing that I find is during this time, it never hurts to ask if there's somebody that you really want to see, if they're willing to see you on a sliding scale temporarily, you know, until things get back on your feet. You can't get a no until you ask.
Yep.
So don't be scared away by what you think it is, especially nowadays. I have several friends that are therapists that are also starving to death. So it really, you know, it really just depends on what's going on. But you really have to make it a priority. And I think people really don't understand that, especially in the earlier years of life. I think not until you get older that you really figure out that, you know, this is just important as your heart ticking properly. So people have to remember that.
It is. And, you know, as a personal note, you know, just to give a personal view on all of this, it has been incredibly stressful to not only be the rock for my couples, because, you know, obviously they're going to dump on me about all their emotions, and my job is to keep their dream alive in any way possible. But then also, you know, to also have to deal with my own emotions about all of this, you know, because, you know, my business is non-existent at the moment, yet I'm working harder than ever, you know, to make sure that people have their new dates and that we renegotiate the contracts. I mean, sometimes I don't know which way to turn. I mean, I feel like this is my counseling section, actually, Dr. Parades. I feel like
if you can say that you are the business, darling. Does that work? Because you're above me, I think. Yeah.
So Keith, listen, you know,
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Hold on, she was answering. Sorry, go ahead.
So
ahead,
you know, I hear you, Keith. Right? You know, I've been practicing for 20 years, and I love what I do. In the last 6 months, I've never felt more stressed and like I was gonna snap than in my entire career. And I have the tools and I know what to do, but this is beyond anybody's tools. I mean, most therapists will tell you what's happening across the board in everyone's life. There is not one person in this country that's completely unaffected by this. It's just a matter of levels of being affected. So Keith, I would kind of tell you to, when you feel like you are feeling like you need some support, you need to go seek that support. That could be as simple as a friend. That can go be as simple as taking a walk. I think that the mantra of self-care, which a lot of people vomit when I say the word self-care, like it's for a reason why therapists talk about self-care, because you can't pour from an empty cup. And so there has to be a point where you say, so I need to take care of myself and I need to be able to say no, and that's okay. And then I'll go hard later. But right now I need to kind of take care of myself so I can function for others.
Just bag up there, Spanx, honey, for a couple minutes. You'll be fine.
Right? And actually, I just heard this earlier today. Somebody said a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And I feel like that it's a Jamaican saying. And so I feel like that's super important. You got to speak up. You got to speak up about how you're feeling. And if that means you reach out to your wedding dress, consultant, if you're reaching out to your florist, if you're reaching out to your invitation person, I mean, I think that it's important just to speak up. And I think a lot of people are so concerned about how they look, not only just in social media, but to their friends. It's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
And I think
call
you're
her
kinda
Jan,
getting
call
into
her
my
Marcy,
question.
call her Tyler. If not, call the doctor, honey.
So that's my question. That's basically my question. We as professionals, we've engaged into this relationship with these clients. How do we tactfully, because when you look at the traditional wedding planning guru stuff, nowhere on there does it say seek psychological help before your wedding. I have never seen this until here now. So
right.
It could also be taken as an insult if I said to my bride, I think, if I sent you to Tania, I think this would be a really great thing for you. How would we tactfully, tell someone that maybe this might be the best thing for them?
So I think that's a great question, Tyler, and thank you for asking it. So, a couple things. Your question implies that seeking therapy may be taken by some people as offensive, and it may be taken, offensive, and you certainly can't control or manage that. The other part is you could substitute the word therapy for support. You seem to be struggling with a lot of stuff connected to the wedding. There seem to be a lot of issues of communication with you and your mother-in-law, you and your mother, you and your whoever. Have you thought about seeking some support? And that could mean a billion things. That could mean going to the bookstore and getting a book. I'm not married to therapy. I'm married to seeking help. And that could be a billion different ways. Have you chatted with a friend? Well, my friends don't understand. Well, then have you chatted with someone that's a professional that might be able to guide you? There's kind of tiers to see. At the end of the day, I'm a support person. I'm no different than all of you. I just have a couple of initials after my name, right? But I'm a support person, right? So it doesn't have to be me. But when something is so obvious and the couple or the bride, in the case that we're talking, is so impacted by something, I almost feel like we need to have the onus to say, you really seem like you're struggling here. I want to be able to support you. Have you thought about seeking some support and what that may look like? Oh, well, I don't have any friends that understand. Well, so have you thought about, counseling someone who's really going to be able to guide you in some way? And to me, that sort of is a softball thing instead of outright saying, this is a massive disaster. You need therapy yesterday.
Well,
I think a lot of it is making it normal. Like it's not, oh my God, something is wrong with you. You need to make a call. I've said many times, like, I can feel your stress. Have you thought about reaching out to anybody to help work with you, work you through the stress? Have you, somebody that's an advocate, somebody that you can talk to, somebody that's totally impartial, just to get some of this out of you. Really, that's for me, my experience is that's half the battle, is just getting it out. I mean, the best therapists don't say much. They let you get it out, and that's really what it's about. So I think we can make it normal and make it more of a stress reduction thing. And what we deal with in our particular business, I think that makes a big difference.
Well, and I was just going to say, we have a preferred vendor list for everything else that's related to a wedding. I'm actually going to add this as a preferred vendor section in my wedding guideline.
Good.
And I think that every planner out there and every professional that's involved in weddings should actually start thinking about putting a preferred vendor list for psychologists and therapists, because it's more important now than ever. And I think if anything COVID's done, it's made us kind of look in at ourselves and go, what do I need in order to make sure that I'm going to be okay? And I love what you said. You can't pour from an empty cup. And I love that, because you got to fill yourself up first before you're going to be able to help support everybody else. I mean,
may I ask a
Marcy,
question?
Yeah, of course.
I totally agree. And I had a bride who actually was in the healthcare field, who I actually did recommend. I said because I felt she was under a lot of stress, and she's in the front lines seeing everything day in and day out. Her wedding was coming up. And she was like, you could just feel the tension and the stress from her to the point where she was crying. And I would be like, listen, I'm like, you can call me anytime. However, if you feel you need more support, you have to take care of you. Because if you're not taking care of you, then everything else is for naught. You have to be there for yourself first so that everything else can fall in line to be with it.
And Brooke, you were going to say something?
It's get out of my mind, Marcy. Oh my God. So she's fabulous, right? So I was just gonna be like, so what do you do when you have friends like me that are like, Keith, you know this, call me if you need me, just don't need me. That's kind of that. You know what I'm saying? Like, what do you say to people like me? That's not nice.
Well, I tell you to speak up. I mean,
the point was like what Marcy said. I can do X, Y, and Z, but maybe you need A, B, C, D, and E, and I don't. Those aren't my alphabet letters, like that kind of thing. So basically, what I was gonna say, like a smart ass, do the little thing you do. That Marcy did very professional.
Oh wait, are we supposed to be beeped out here?
No, please. This is live. We never know.
I only get like 2 cuss words, and they're like very semi like Old Testament that I'm allowed to before. Cancel without Claude and cigarettes.
That's funny. Yeah, but I mean, how do you? That's actually a great question. Yeah.
So, there's a case that I'm thinking about, specifically, as everyone is talking, and there's this woman that I saw many, many, many years ago when she was single, and then she had reached out to me when she was about to get married. I mean, this was been like 5 or 6 years ago. And I know her stuff, right? And I was like, I strongly encourage you to get, counseling. It's very important that your partner understand all these nuances. No, that's in the past. I don't want to deal with it. And I said to myself, I'm going to see this lady one day. And she came back now during COVID. She is married, been married for a while, has a couple kids. And the same reason that she came to me as an individual is now magnified because of her partner, who has no idea what's going on. And so I looked at her. I mean, I've known this woman for years. I looked at her and I said, so how long did you think that you were going to be able to not deal with this before you had to deal with it? And so I would ask everyone to ask your bride that, right? If you see your bride or your couple, like at the point of where they're going to snap, just saying, listen, I'm going to tell you what I see as an outsider. How long do you think that you can go like this before you have no choice? So either deal with it now, where your head is a little bit more clear. You're not completely in the trench, like Jan said. You're not in the marriage. You're on the outside, so you have the tools, or you're going to be like, it'll find you. It's not going to go away.
I think that's actually a really important point, is that it doesn't go away. You can't wait this out. It's gonna follow you. And so I think it's also about normalizing. It's about finding the resources. And I think if anything the show has done over the last 2 episodes is let people know that this is a real thing. You're not out in you're not unusual. You're not a unicorn when it comes to this. And I put the positive spin on it because, unicorns are everything. But, yes. But it's just one of those things that I think that the more we talk about it, the more normalized it gets. That mental health is a big deal. And during COVID and wedding planning and families and all of this stress, it's more important now than ever to reach out to anybody, to anyone, but also if you're the receiver of this information, it's also just as important to make sure that you respond, you don't let it fall on deaf ears. Because if I have a bride that comes to me and says, I'm just so stressed out, I just don't know what I'm going to do, I'm not going to be like, oh, it's okay, honey. I want to listen to it.
If I can be this brave with contour, I mean, you can put up the phone there. I'm just saying.
I had a girl years ago that I will never forget. She came into the store New Year's Eve. I was closed. But she came to meet with me, and I worked her through calling off her wedding. And she was like, you're the only person that I think can help me with this, because I'd already worked with her so much through the family dynamic. And we did. And we called off the wedding. And years later, I married her off to something, that was far better suited to her. So it's like you said, you just got to open your mouth. And you got to be willing to listen and hear. And yep. So, we've done it all where we are.
Well, guys, we're finishing up the hour. And again, we filled this up with like a crazy amount of stories and a crazy amount of resources. And I hope that if you're out there, you realize that you're not by yourself. There are resources. Reach out to a local college, find those resources. And even as a planner, the Bridal Society has a platform also, which I just found out about, that through social media, where you can get into those groups that are private, that aren't shared with the general public. So you can bitch and complain and be able to realize that other people are, yeah, I know, right? I said bitch. Anyway, it's a female dog. Anyway, so but it's that you're not alone, and that everybody is dealing with these stressors, and everybody's pathways is difficult at this time. So I thank you, Dr. Tania Parades. Again, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you, Jen, Carol. Obviously, you're on the front lines. There's nobody that sees more when it comes to these brides. Again, thank you again, Brooke Logan Stoner, Tyler Black, Marcy Gutenberg. It was another fabulous show. So next week, we're going to be doing a planners roundtable. We're going to be welcoming Anna Hess with Anna Hess Events, and of course, Marcy Gutenberg and Tyler Black and Brooke Logan Stoner, where we're going to be talking about what planners are having to deal with and all the solutions that we are finding with all these new problems. And until next week, everybody say bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye, guys.
Bye.